Well, we got a little variety in this COA program, I think. We've got a little look at a political position. We're not taking a political position, but so you better understand the town moderator's position. Now we're going to go off into a literary area. And without further ado, I would like to introduce you to this man to my left, Mr. Peddlar Bridges.
Yep, thank you.
Welcome, Peddlar.
Right,
All
right.
I know he looks like a hippie. He's really a beat. You're more of a beat.
Yeah, from
Nick, right?
the old days, the
old
50s.
Allen Ginsberg,
Yeah.
Larry Ferlinghetti.
Yeah.
But
I met them all over the
Did you
years.
really?
Yeah, I met them all. And you know who I got to hang out with one night was really exciting? Jack Kerouac had a cousin named Paul Kerouac.
Yeah.
It looked just like him when he was young. I mean, because I recognized him. Oh, yeah, that's Paul Kerouac. So I hung out with him one night and because, you had a lot of interesting family stories, which I can't remember one of them, getting that old guy stuff.
Yeah.
But, it's all good. You know what I mean?
Statute of limitations probably up. Did you eat any funny mushrooms?
No. Yeah, right.
Sorry.
But it was cool to meet him. So,
Yeah.
I met a lot of people.
Did he
over
do
the
any
years.
writing like his brother?
No. I think he did a lot of the partying, though. I
Okay.
mean, I'd still love to see him again. He seemed like a nice guy.
Well, they were from Lowell, right?
Yeah, that's where I met him. It was a Kerouac festival that I was part of. And the name of the show that we did was Aztec Radio for the Kerouac Festival.
Oh, no kidding.
Yeah, this was back in...
Listen, if you folks out there, if Peddlar looks a little familiar to you, it's because he has his own program here on ICAM, the Road Poet
Cafe, yeah. ICAM, the greatest thing since sliced bread.
That's pretty cool.
Anybody out there that would sing, dance, plays the piano, taps dance across the stage, or pogo sticks across the live wire, you ought to get a hold of ICAM, because they'll put you right here with us. We'll move over. I'd be glad to move over.
We haven't got a call from Tori Spelling, though. I'm sort of waiting for one. We don't want to go mainstream. All right, so tell me how you got into
take
this.
the whole show anyway.
Tell me how you got into this poetry business.
I always did, ever
Yeah?
since I was a kid. I always
Okay.
loved poetry. And, in life, a lot of people out there say, if I had life to do it over again. And then they just keep plowing through in the same direction. It's like when I was in my 30s, in fact, I wasn't quite in my 30s, I met a lady, wonderful lady. Some people out there might remember her, Margaret Farini. They named the auditorium in Hamilton High School after her while she was still alive.
Really?
I mean, that's
wow.
big doings. When you're alive and they name something after
Yeah,
you.
that's true. Yeah.
And I met her at a party, and, she asked me, she says, what's your story? She says, you seem much more glib than all the rest of these people. And I said, well, I want to be a writer. And she said, well, what's stopping you? I said, well, I never went to college. What's stopping you? Well, I don't really have a GED or high school diploma. What's stopping you? She tutored me English for a year and a half so I could get my GED. And I didn't realize who she was, because if you read about her a lot of times, you're going to read about Peg Duffy. And Peg Duffy, it was she ended up Mrs. Margaret Farini, like Farini out of Gloucester, Vincent Farini's ex-wife.
Oh, no kidding.
So he was the poet laureate of Gloucester. I didn't know the connections.
Oh, wow.
She tutored me for a year and a half, and I had a lot of wonderful, wonderful breaks. I went to North Shore Community College, I got my GED. Then I went through the college, and the first thing I ever got published on actual ink, outside of the first thing I actually got published, Matt Rulovic. He taught calligraphy and writing for money at North Shore Community College, and it was an adjunct course, and I took it.
Huh.
And he told me was he painful? He used to say, Peddlar, you gotta start here on the page. You gotta end here. You can't be ending in the middle of sentences. You gotta bring the margins in, and you gotta spell some of these words right. You know what I mean? And so and then one day he said, Peddlar, he says, I'm an editor for the Lynn Sunday Post, the old Lynn Sunday Post. It was as big as a barn door. And he says, I really like this piece. He says, can I use it Sunday? And I said, what about the margins and this? He said, I'll take care of it. So the first piece that I ever got published, not only, the professor published it for me, he typed it up for me.
Yeah.
And now remember though, when he handed me the check, This is
wow.
why I do everything I can for every other writers. He said, this one was for free. The next one's going to cost you.
Okay.
And to me, the cost has always been, because I probably put 200 people on the stage. I probably, I put like 200 people in magazines and newspapers over the years. So, but I always think of him and that check.
Hey, by the way, Peddlar is a great example of someone who utilizes the senior center here. And that's how I met Peddlar. He was on the computer one day and just kind of like, hey, dude, what are you doing, And I found out he was a poet. He comes in, uses the computer, types poetry.
So far, we've put out 5 books using the computer over at the senior center.
Wow.
Like this,
Man.
Exhibit A, Exhibit B. That ought to get me acquitted. You know what I mean?
The Iron Ride.
Yeah, you know what I mean?
A lot of
Most
it's geared to motorcycles.
He's geared to motorcycles. This one's a hometown review, which is stock cars. This one's shifting gears.
Wow.
That's cars.
Do they still have stock car races?
Yes, but they're not like they used to be.
I used to go up to Groveland here.
Yeah, when they stock car races really, really changed was when they made them put mufflers on there.
Oh,
They didn't have that big, loud
Oh yeah,
roar.
that's in Groveland. If
And
you got lost, you could just you could hone in on the track by listening to the roar.
I'd like to say hi to Ron Marcarello out there. Do you know Ron?
Yeah.
Now that car he built that car. It's a replica of Bentley Warren's original stock car from when he was young, before he went in the service.
No, Ronnie worked for a friend of mine who was running a small
Machine shop.
machine shop. Yeah, and they used to turn out all sorts.
Oh,
of
he's
stuff.
brilliant.
Yeah.
He's brilliant. Nice guy.
Is he still around?
Yeah, he's still around. I was at Bentley's up north, the saloon there.
Okay.
I was selling an ad, and I bumped into Bentley, and I'm showing the pictures because I had those on with poems and on laminated boards.
Yeah.
And Bentley seen that, and he says, "Wait, where did you get that picture?" I said, He said, "Where did you get that picture?" And I said, "Well, I took it down in Ipswich." He says, "That car is an exact replica of the car I raced when I was a kid. I was still in his teens."
Wow.
And I says, "How close is it to right?" He says, "It's scary. It's got everything but the dents from last Saturday night racing." And so I've used it a number of times in this. There's a story in this book about stock car racing and that stuff over the
Oh,
years.
I might borrow that. I used to like the demolition derby that they would have every once in a while.
Yeah. Well, I remember before we had all the EPA, was what they used to do is on the 4th of July, push them all together, the ones that didn't make it through the demos, and then set them on fire. That was, the celebration for that year. Yeah, they do well.
The wild times about it. It's a lot different than from NASCAR.
Yeah, a lot of people, you might remember this. Were you here, like, in New England probably in 64, 65,
Born and
60s?
raised, man.
Okay. I don't remember if you remember one year. Maybe it must have been 66, that the smog was so bad in the fall when we were still burning leaves and they could burn rubbish.
Yeah.
You could hardly drive through it, let alone see through it.
Yeah, vaguely. What's
Yeah.
something that I don't know if you would remember this. This was in probably the early 60s. There was a sports car race at the Beverly Airport.
I can remember, was it Barnett used to
I
be
think they
involved.
they didn't do it very many times.
Yeah.
But it was kind of cool,
Yeah.
It was like bringing Thompson, Connecticut, those places which were sports cars, to our local. Anyhow, it's
Yeah, there's a lot of
digressing.
money involved in that, mostly insurance. A lot of insurance.
Well, nowadays, you see these guys with their outfits. They got
yeah.
every single company in the world there has got.
And it's not just the uniforms are so much safer than the old
Fire
days.
resistant and all that other stuff.
Yeah, there's a saying about that now. Imagine when they came out with the first bicycles, those big high wheelers.
Yeah.
They would go much, much, much faster than the original bicycles they had just before that, called the bone shakers.
Yeah.
They were kind of like a tricycle with only 2 wheels, but you couldn't go nowhere because the top speed, pedaling as fast as you could, was only like 8 miles an hour.
I know where one of those old bikes is in this town, and it is over on Turkey Shore Road, and that would be a great piece for this
Yeah,
program.
we ought to. And anyways, the new ones could get going as fast as a good speed trotting horse. They could get up about 15, 18 miles.
Really?
The big wheelers.
Yeah, I know.
Yeah,
I
the
know.
big wheels.
Yeah.
But a problem with them was If you hit anything, you up there, and you got sling. But the point I was bringing up is, why nobody ever had a crash helmet? Now, you're not supposed to say crash helmet. Now you're supposed to say safety helmet.
Safety helmet. And no brakes on those bikes.
I don't know if they had any at all.
you jam the
you used to
back
backlights
the pedals.
Yeah, but some of them I think after the late '90s started to have them.
I hope so.
But the safety bicycle, that's the one we still have today, came out in probably 1890, and and those changed the whole world.
You took a lot of extension courses at Harvard.
Well,
right?
I got a degree in creative writing and literature.
Oh, no kidding.
Yeah, from Harvard, from Extension. And I took a long process to figure out I wanted to go to that school.
Yeah.
Yeah, I found the catalog. I thought it was a paperback somebody lost, and I picked it up. And I realized there was a catalog to Harvard Extension. I said, and it said all welcome. And I'm a biker, so all doesn't necessarily always mean bikers. And I said, wow, I want to do that. And by the time I was done picking away, I ended up with a double degree in creative writing and literature.
What is your poetry span? Is it what do you talk about? Anything that comes into your head?
Whatever I write.
Yeah?
I've done some journalistic.
Yeah.
Like the Celia Thaxter history of it, of like the way she was they call her the poet on
Why
demand.
do I know that name?
Because she would have lived out on the islands up north there.
Okay.
Yeah. But the story on it was that she wrote on demand. And my favorite one was Edgar A. Guest, because he wrote on demand. That he had come up with a topic, and he was deadly because he would write something like a fire, about a big fire,
Yeah.
and 3 or 4 years later, or months, fire would happen, and they'd stick it in the paper, and everybody would think he just wrote it about them, but he didn't. But he wrote hundreds, and some say it was doggerel, but he was the voice of the people.
Do you write the same time every day?
No, I just write when I write.
Okay. Because I remember reading an article about John Updike, the novelist, and he would go to he had an office that he wrote in, and even if he didn't have any creative ideas, he would go and sit at the typewriter.
Some people
it would
do that.
discipline, and he had to do it. And he says a lot of it ended up in the circular file.
I write when I write, and hopefully I do believe heavily in deadlines.
Okay.
A deadline, and I don't care if the last half of the book's missing. You said you're going to put it out on a deadline. You put it out on that deadline.
Read us one of your poems, will you?
That's a
Go ahead. One of your favorites or something.
Well, right now I've been doing a lot about Laconia because
the bike. What do they call it? The bike climb? What?
It's Laconia Motorcycle Week.
Okay.
And in fact, what I'm going to read? This is much slower, much easier than I usually read. It's kind of a Laconia piece. And there used to be this little old man, and I'm their age now, lady. They
unfortunately we all are.
Yeah, but the old gentleman fall asleep in club meetings. This is the King's Nights back in the 80s.
Yeah.
And he'd fall asleep, and he'd be nodding off, and they'd be arguing about something on the club floor. And there would be a vote, and she'd give him a shot in the ribs, and his hand would go up. He figured it was time to vote. And every once in a while, she'd wake him up when it wasn't a vote, and he'd still raise his hand. And this is kind of, it's, they say don't let the reality, the truth get in the way of good poetry. So you take pieces and clips and you use them, but 90% of it is usually got the narrative of real life in it.
Sort of. That should apply to politics. No, I should. Politics.
I'm not going to go there. I said 90. Excuse me. I said 90% should be true.
Right.
Okay. Okay. The name of this poem is Gracie.
Gracie?
Gracie.
Okay.
Old Wild Bill Santa Claus opened the garage door. It was a righteous day. It was a fine day to head for Laconia. But it wouldn't seem the same now without Gracie. Over his workbench hung a photo of Laconia 1959, his first. Laconia 59, he was there. Laconia 69, he was there. Laconia 79, it seemed like yesterday. He remembered Gracie, young. He remembered Gracie, older. He remembered Gracie when she began to hobble a bit, and he mentioned buying a sidecar. He remembered her ire. You ain't putting me in no baby carriage. I'll ride behind you as I always have. And now Gracie was gone. He remembered the kick they got for about 15 years back, the first time they ever won the Oldest Riders Trophies Award. And now he seemed to win it every time out. And he would bring it back and set it on the lonely shelf with all the rest. He thought about the other men he watched win that trophy. Gunner, Tuffy, Old Man Dan Weber. He pushed the new Sporty out of the garage and thought about his old FLH. They call it downsizing, he told himself. Just another word for getting old. But it was a fine day, a righteous day, and who was he to break faith with tradition? He decided to ride up 107, stop at the Pines for a bit to eat, hit 107.6 and cruise by the track on his way to the Wares Beach, because Gracie always liked that way, and so did he.
Oh, wow. A little bittersweet there.
Well, it's just reality. You know what I mean? That's the other thing. People, you can encapsulate a lot in a poem, and it's fairly easy to write once you catch the pattern. And like I had an old gentleman, and now, like I said, I'm an old gentleman myself, but he was on my TV show.
Yeah.
You know, this is back in, I don't know, late 80s, early 90s. And he held up the tape, VCR tape in those days, and he said, "See this? I won't always be here, but my grandchildren will have me on television." And that pretty well tells what you're doing when you put somebody in ink on the page, or you put somebody behind the camera, in front of the camera, put them on you're giving them something that isn't just for today. It can be forever. And if they write something really wonderful, well, it belongs to everybody. And if it's only even doggerel, it's their family will be happy with it forever.
I'm smiling because last week, rummaging around my cellar, I ran across my old video machine that we used to take on trips and stuff. And my wife and I had a blast. You know, here we are, 15, 18 years ago, young and sprightly. And you just made me think of something. I'm going to have those made into DVDs.
Yeah.
And leave them for my granddaughters.
Yeah, I mean,
that'd be something.
You know, it's so good because what you can leave today, what you can give. I'm hoping to do an open mic here on the show pretty soon.
Okay.
You know what I mean? It's just to bring, because that's what it's all about.
Yeah.
And I just like to mention how I started doing stage work a little bit and getting. I seen this Beat Festival, in fact, at the Screening Room in Newburyport.
Oh, I love that place.
Yeah. And so I went to it, and somebody mistook me for one of the readers. And, you know, because I always carry a bunch of stuff because I was working for the school paper at the time. And they said, somebody said, well, talk to Jack. Jack's looking, you know, because they didn't know. And so I went and I talked to Jack, and he said, well, I'm sorry, we're full today. The ticket's full. And he says, but if you ever come into Cambridge, I'll give you a feature.
Really?
Yeah, well, I told him, I said, I'm good. I said, at least she says I'm good. You know what I mean? Like, I meant writing. But the bottom line, it was like, he said, yeah. So 1 year to the day later, I went into Cambridge, the Stone Soup. It's poetry. And true to his word, he said, I talked to him. He said, all right, I'll give you a feature.
Wow.
And then he said, but I'll never forget, he's write my name down and give me a thing. He said, well, it'll be about $35. And I said, I got to pay $35 to read poetry? And he says, no, we pay you. and today, hardly anybody gets paid, because those days, we used to, what was Ray Flynn out of Boston, the mayor?
The mayor? Yeah.
Yeah. Jack was on his board for cultural affairs.
Okay.
And we used to go everywhere. We hung out to Chinkle. We hung out, that's where I met Ferlinghetti. Okay. You know what I mean? It was like, we had a great time.
One of our first encounters was I told you that I had read Ferlinghetti's Coney Island of the Mind, which was a great book. It's a beat book around the time of Ginsberg and stuff. But there you go. All right, we're going to think of wrapping this up here, but you want to solicit some people maybe to come on your show?
If they'd love to come on the Road Poets Cafe, they're more than welcome. And we'll get some other stories. We'll have Paul on my show. Maybe he'll sing, dance, juggle, piano, step dance, cross the live wire. But whatever, we'll be there. Thank you, Paul.
I've memorized one one poem, and that's Whose Woods These Are, I Think I Know, Robert Frost. And that's the only poem. But anyhow, thank you very much.
Thank you very much,
Keep up
Paul.
the good work, man.